LSU unknowingly dodges a week 1 bullet. We'll explain. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get great podcasts. Of course, on YouTube as well, so please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Thank you for watching on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every single weekday. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. So we know LSU is going to open up the football season against Clemson. And look, that is 8 months away. I am not sitting here trying to deep dive into LSU Clemson 8 months in advance. However, there was a little bit of a newsy item that dropped here on this Thursday as we record going into the weekend. Clemson and old tricky Dabo just 1 week ago. Look, I get it, right? Dabo's the aw shucks, golly gee, the guy who's, just always seemingly a little aloof. Guy's name's Dabo, for God's sakes. Every now and again, Dabo's got a little something up his sleeve, right? Look, season opener last year, a few days before LSU played Clemson, what happened? Oh, A.J. Halsey. Remember that bowl game when A.J. Halsey got ejected for targeting? Yeah, that really good spring safety transfer is going to start for LSU 3 days before the game. Yeah, he can't play. He got ejected in the bowl game for targeting. He can't play in the first half. Dabo was knew it, was sitting on it, waited until a few days before the game, so LSU was already deep into their prep, gave him an advantage. Oh, tricky little Dabo. Oh, Dabo, you remember this? Remember Walker Parks, that offensive lineman from Clemson? Their 3-year starter on the offensive line leading up to the LSU game. You remember this, don't you?
Questions? Walker Parks, is he? Oh, he'd be all right. He'd be all right. He'd be good to go. He didn't go today. We held him today, but he'll be all right. Okay.
Good to go. Oh, he'd be all right. Be good to go. Oh, Walker Parks. You mean the lineman who missed the first 3 games of the season? Oh, it'd be good to go. Oh, no. Dabo's got a few tricks up his sleeve. How about Dabo? Just a week ago, Dabo's sitting up there with the receipts, reading text messages, timeline, the whole 9. Oh, Pete Golding, Austin Thomas, and that crew out there. Trying to get his linebacker. Dabo had the receipts. He was ready to roll. Well, telling you, you can sleep on Dabo. You can make fun of Dabo all you want. I've made fun of Dabo plenty. Look, remember when Clemsoning was a thing? Because Clemsoning was a thing at one point. It ain't a thing no more. Dude won a couple national titles, played for a couple more. Lost to Bama, lost to LSU, but dude had a half-decade run where Clemson was as good as anybody in college football. Dude solidified himself as a Hall of Famer. You can laugh at Dabo. Dabo's got the skins on the wall. If you sleep on Dabo, go sneak up and bite you. And try to do it to LSU. So our friends over at The State, which is a new newspaper up there in South Carolina, they're reporting via records request that Clemson tried to schedule a week 0 game this season before they played LSU. However, the NCAA denied that request. Now, if you're not familiar, college football teams have the opportunity to play on week 0. Now, you cannot play prior to the Thursday before Labor Day. That's when the earliest you can play is the Thursday before Labor Day, unless you get approved for a week 0 game. The exemptions are if you play an international game, if you play Hawaii at any point, or if you have certain scheduling waivers. Well, Clemson in the ACC this year plays Cal, ACC Cal, in Berkeley. So Clemson's got to go across the country. So Clemson took this opportunity to apply to the NCAA for a waiver to play week 0, which would have given, they would have played Charleston Southern in week 0, which would have opened up a date in the schedule and given them a second open date. Of course, you have your open date schedule. This would have given them a second open date if they moved the Charleston Southern game to week 0. And that means they would have had an opponent, a tune-up before they played LSU, but it would have given them a second open date because of their trip to the West Coast for Cal. Now, look, let's be real. You're talking about the ACC and the Big Ten now are both bicoastal, okay? You have Rutgers playing UCLA. It's cross country. You have Maryland playing Oregon. In the ACC, you've got Clemson playing Cal and Stanford. You got Florida State going to the way. It's what it is in this era now. But I think LSU, had this been approved, they would have had a game before they played LSU on Labor Day weekend. And when you think about how this transpires, you're talking about a Clemson team that is working in a new quarterback, obviously with Cade Klubnik no longer there. It's a new quarterback they're working in. And they're losing a ton to the NFL draft. There's 2 great defensive linemen we've talked about. They're going to lose 3 starters on the offensive line. LSU is going to be a massive home favorite against Clemson. And this was Dabo's opportunity to say, let me get a tune-up. Now, the interesting thing, and I say this often, actions speak louder than words. It's one of the sort of tenets that I just believe in life. You can say whatever you want. What you do is going to carry more weight than what you say. Dabo, after LSU went to Clemson week 1 in 2025 and beat Clemson at Clemson Memorial Stadium, Dabo said in the postgame, quote, I wouldn't change it. I mean, we could go play a team and win 42-6 and everybody feels good, but there were some things that got exposed tonight and that'll make us better. Now, it did make them better. Clemson went 7-6, but so did LSU. Those were 2 top 10 teams. It was a great theater, great game. As it turned out, neither team was actually particularly good a season ago. But Dabo has said that he wants to play the best in week 1. And they've played those marquee openers against Georgia, now against LSU. Clemson's done it. But when you're going to try to schedule a week 0 game, that speaks volumes. And I'm going to remind you of something else that Verge Osbury said to me on my radio show. And this, again, is Verge Osbury, who was at the time not athletic director Verge Osbury. This was LSU associate athletic director in charge of scheduling, Verge Osbury. LSU tried to schedule Grambling in 2025 in week 0. Remember, LSU was on this awful losing streak. They lost 5 straight openers, man, dating back to 2020 when they lost to Mississippi State. 20 against Mississippi State, 21 against UCLA. I mean, you just run through the list. 22 and 23 against Florida State, 24 in Vegas against Southern Cal. LSU had lost 5 straight openers. Sick of starting behind the 8 ball. Verge tried to schedule Grambling in week 0, but Grambling couldn't ultimately make the game happen. So, point is, for all that schedulers say or coaches say that they're for the marquee openers, the more we continue to see actions speak louder than words. They want week 0 games. I'm going to tell you, this isn't necessarily a pressing point of view, but something that I want you to file away because we're going to come back to this. And I've talked about this on plenty of platforms over the years. But the most important part of this conversation is as we look toward what the future of college football scheduling may be, we're looking at a reality where we are going to see ultimately college football start on week 0, end Thanksgiving, no conference championship games, the playoffs starting that first weekend in December, and the season ending with the national championship game on New Year's Day. And then when that championship game ends on New Year's Day, and for teams that lose earlier throughout December, you'll start to see the coaching carousel spin. And then you'll have that portal window in the middle of January. And all of the things like what happened with Lane Kiffin leaving in the middle of playoff run are no longer a reality. But it's going to start with the season starting earlier on week 0. More and more coaches are clearly in favor of it. Dabo in this instance is talking about it as a tune-up for LSU. They're phrasing it as, needing a little relief from the cross-country travel when they have to play Cal. But, I mean, everybody in the ACC and the Big Ten is going to do that at this point. This is all about getting a tune-up for a new quarterback, so much turnover to play game before you play LSU. They're telling you what the indicator is. We're going to end up seeing the season start on week 0. But for Clemson, it's not going to start week 0 this year. It's going to start in Baton Rouge, where LSU is going to be a giant favorite. And man, that is going to be a whole scene in Tiger Stadium. Opener of the Kiffin era. Clemson coming in. LSU is going to be a favorite. It is going to be full throat, peak Death Valley. I can't wait to be in that number 4. We'll hope to see you there. But got 8 months to go. Hopefully Charlie Weis is going to be there. Apparently the NFL isn't giving up on that dream. We'll talk about that next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite Seattle Seahawks, you're riding with the Patriots as an underdog, or you're building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone has been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, where stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, season's over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, they're not giving up on Charlie Weis. I'll talk about that in just a quick second, but thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked on the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not already, please go check out our new Everydayer Club. Gives you access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked on LSU, compatible with Apple, Spotify, all the major podcast apps, and an invite to a members-only Locked on Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes group chat just for listeners of this show. So please tap the link in the show notes if you'd like to learn more. So over the past month or so, Charlie Weis Jr. has been a lightning rod of conversation. Actually, we can go back to when Lane Kiffin got the job. We can go back 2 months. And it's continuing because today there's another report that the New York Football Giants could again be interested in trying to add Charlie Weis. But the quick catch up, if you're not familiar with the whole scene yet, if you're an everydayer, shout out, you know this. But go back to when Lane Kiffin was hired. He was hired. Charlie Weis was not one of the guys eager to follow Lane Kiffin to Baton Rouge. He had cold feet and considered staying. Remember, the initial deal LSU agreed to with Charlie Weis was going to pay him $2 million a year to be the offensive coordinator. When Weis was wavering a little bit, boom, $2.5 a year. 3 years, $7.5 million for Charlie Weis. They put a hefty buyout in there as well if he were to leave before spring. So Charlie Weis is on board. But part of the conditions of Charlie Weis being on board was that he got to coach Ole Miss through the college football playoff. So Weis was one of the few assistants that kept going back and forth. I can't imagine what that must have been like, practicing at Ole Miss in the day and then being at LSU on recruiting visits and dinners at night and then back. But it clearly showed two things. Number one, how committed Charlie Weis was to LSU, but also how much he kind of had a little bit of a wandering eye and was focusing on other things as well. Now, there was talk when the New York Giants were looking for a new football coach that potentially Charlie Weis could be a person of interest there in New York with the Giants to be their offensive coordinator because, of course, Jaxson Dart, former Ole Miss quarterback, is the Giants' starting quarterback. They used a first-round pick on him. And we talked about this already, and it makes a lot of sense. If you're an NFL team and you make the type of draft capital investment in a quarterback to use a first-round pick, you have to maximize that player. So Charlie Weis, great relationship with Jaxson Dart, if you pair them together, makes a lot of sense. What we don't know, however, is if Charlie Weis Jr. has any interest in the NFL. Well, he turned down that opportunity with the Giants, telling Chris Lowe that he's committed to LSU. Well, a week ago, the Philadelphia Eagles came calling for Charlie Weis as a person of interest. The report was that Weis did speak to the Eagles, but declined the job, instead saying he's 100% committed to LSU. Now, the initial conversation with the Giants made sense because of the Jaxson Dart tie. I could see that courtesy or that interest from the Giants because of the tie with Dart. As we said a week ago, when the Eagles came calling, now you're talking about a different level of intrigue. Now you're talking about multiple organizations in the NFL, not just ones with a direct tie from their starting quarterback and his his college OC being connected. Now you're talking about the merit of the coach potentially being a guy that can make a leap from college to the pros. Well, Weis, again, commits to LSU. But since then, there's been one big change, and that's that the New York Football Giants have hired John Harbaugh as their head coach, and that Todd Monken was supposed to follow Harbaugh from Baltimore to New York. So Todd Monken was going to be the offensive coordinator of the Giants. Well, that all kind of got flipped on its head now because Monken himself got his own head coaching job. Monken has been named the new head coach of the Cleveland Browns. So John Harbaugh thought Monken was going to be his offensive coordinator with the Giants. Now Monken's the head coach of the Browns. John Harbaugh needs an OC. Well, he's apparently making another run at Charlie Weis. Connor Hughes, who works for SNY TV, tweeted on Thursday. I'll read you the tweet. It's not long. Talking to sources around the NFL, the name garnering a lot of attention for the Giants OC job, now that Todd Monken is the head coach of the Browns, is Charlie Weis Jr. He notes Jordan Renan was on that back in Week 18. Renan was the one back in Week 18 who first reported the interest about Weis and Dart potentially reuniting. He goes on to say, Weis arrived at Ole Miss the same year Jaxson Dart, 2022, served as his quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, although Lane Kiffin called plays at the time, all 3 years. The two remain close. Wouldn't go so far as to say he's the favorite, but he's a name that keeps coming up in league circles. Now, I don't know what Charlie Weis wants to do. This is the part that has to be mentioned as we have this conversation. Talked about it before. I don't know if Charlie Weis has an NFL ambition. Does he want to be an NFL head coach? If he does, you go be an NFL OC, then you get the NFL head coaching job. Does he want to stay in college? Does he want to be a college head coach? I don't know that. Charlie Weis is 32 years old. He's been an OC for the last 6 seasons, 2 at South Florida. Well, actually, prior to that, with Lane at FAU for 2 years. Then South Florida for 2 years, the last 4 years at Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin. But look, does he want to go to the NFL? His dad was an NFL assistant, a college head coach. We'll find out, presuming we have the opportunity to speak to Charlie Weis eventually to know what his ambitions are. But ultimately, for LSU right now, you have a commitment from Charlie Weis, but it is worth noting that his contract with LSU, while there is a massive financial buyout, 300% his annual contract value, if he goes for a college OC job, he can leave for a head coaching job in college or a play calling job in the NFL with no buyout. So if Charlie Weis decides he wants to go to the Giants, coach Jaxson Dart, be in the NFL, he could leave tomorrow with no buyout. So if nothing else, it bears watching. Now, Weis has already refuted the Giants and the Eagles, signifying that he's likely going to be staying in Baton Rouge. But if the NFL keeps calling and they can make it interesting enough, then it's at least worth watching. I think it's also important to mention when you look at what the average salaries are for NFL coordinators, by and large, the average, again, these don't have to be disclosed, are around $1 million a year. And when you hear that, you go, okay, well, he's staying. Because I'm going to tell you something, man. You ever been to New York? I have. I love New York. $1 million in New York ain't going to get you much. $2.5 million in Baton Rouge? You living like a king. Not a king, a king. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for Charlie Weis to spend a year or multiple years at LSU and Baton Rouge. I think that's what he's going to do. But we're going to follow this as it continues to play out. Okay, final break. Let me step aside. One interesting strength of schedule metric for 2026 college football that you may find interesting. We'll jump into it next year as we wrap up Locked on LSU. It's your team every day. This is Mazda's moving the game forward for those who show there's more to the score than what's on the screen. You know what? How about a hat tip to number 18? How about a hat tip to Garrett Nussmeier? Garrett Nussmeier's fifth-year season in college didn't go the way any of us thought it would. But he's there in Mobile this week, competing in the Senior Bowl, and finally getting healthy and looking like himself again, and could very well emerge into being the second or third best quarterback in this draft behind Fernando Mendoza, maybe battling Ty Simpson. We'll see. But Nussmeier was number 18. Even after suffering that injury that cost him the final month of the season, he didn't shut it down and go to Arizona or Dallas or Florida to go train for the combine. You know what he did? He was there every single game day, every practice day with his teammates, being the leader that we thought he would be, wearing the number 18. So congrats to Garrett Nussmeier. Even though the season didn't go the way he wanted, still, this reminds us of what it takes to raise the bar. It's the extra work off the field, off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it the extra fire, the grit, the never quit. We put the same passion at Mazda into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Mazda, move and be moved. It's nearly impossible to put together a strength of schedule metric today because nobody's played a game yet in the 2026 college football season. Now, we could look at the 2025 records and try to make a projection. But the thing for me that's always going to hold a little more water and weight is, what does Vegas say? And if you're not a sports bettor, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. I am. You know that. But when you think about Vegas and odds makers, they're not being moved by wrapping themselves in their school colors, singing the fight song, and setting lines based on that. They're motivated by one color, green, money. They want to be right. And they want to be accurate to generate equal action on both sides of a number. So I always tend to put more stock into what Vegas odds makers say as opposed to what pundits say. Because even the best might have some influence based on some bias. Well, there's an interesting strength of schedule metric that I saw put out. This was by LSU Wire. And they used the Vegas national championship odds for every team on the schedule to determine strength of schedule. So based on that, opponents and their national championship odd average, Georgia actually has the weakest strength of schedule in the SEC in 2026. Vanderbilt's 15th, South Carolina 14th. As you keep moving down the list, Alabama has the 13th easiest schedule in the SEC. And then you find your Fighting Tigers of LSU at 12. Now, we look at the schedule and we go, man, Clemson at home, at Ole Miss, got to play A&M, although A&M's coming back to Baton Rouge for a second consecutive year. Look at November. Bama, Texas, at Tennessee in November. What a brutal schedule this is. Well, yeah, on its face, and it certainly looks really appealing. But when you look at it, Clemson's national championship odds are 0.99. Louisiana Tech 0.04, Ole Miss 1.73%. Texas A&M 3.89. The best odds to win the national championship of any team LSU plays is Texas at 8.49%. So Texas at about 8.5%. The second best odds to win the national championship among LSU's opponents are A&M at 3.89. And then it's Alabama at 3.56. The point being, all of these teams that are on your schedule, it may sound or feel daunting, but when you look at it, my goodness, Clemson replacing so much. Ole Miss lost their head coach, their offensive coordinator, a ton of their defensive skill from the playoff team. You know, we talk about Texas A&M, which they returned Marcel Reed, but there have been a ton of overhaul on that schedule, on that roster from a team that made the playoffs. Going to November, we've talked about Alabama, back-to-back 4-loss seasons. You know, you make a road trip to Tennessee. Who's going to be Tennessee's quarterback? I mean, is it going to be Staub, the backup from Colorado? That all of a sudden doesn't look as daunting. Texas with Arch and a lot of talent could certainly be a massive game, but Texas is going to play in Baton Rouge. The point is, well, yes, that schedule on its face, the names looks daunting. It's just to break it down a little bit, it might be more navigable than any of us think right now. But we got 8 months to talk about all that. In any event, what we know is Clemson ain't going to be playing week 0. They'll be in Baton Rouge week 1. And that is going to be great theater as it plays out. We'll be here every step of the way. So do me a favor. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day.